You are listening to the Marc Guzman Podcast Experience. Before we get started, just a reminder that you can find all of my available rental properties on my website at marcguzman.com. If you own investment property, click on the Owner Services section to see our complete list of services. This episode and wine tasting is sponsored by Lenny Clark with Prime Lending. Lenny Clark is a loan officer specializing in residential home lending. He communicates with you every step of the way, and his honesty sets him apart from the rest. He's able to think outside of the box due to his experience and is able to tailor a loan program to fit your needs. If you can't qualify just yet, not a problem. He will let you know what you need to do in order to be ready. Lanny is also backed by Prime Lending, which is one of the biggest and fastest growing lending banks in the nation. They have simplified the home lending process down to 5 steps. And FYI, step number 5 is to relax and enjoy your new home. So contact Lenny Clark today at 510-964-0620. Last month, we had Jeff Rubin, president of the Pinole Historical Society, on the podcast to talk about the history of Pinole. For a small town, Pinole has an incredible, long, and rich history. Last time, we talked about the Pinole Historical Society and a few of the notable families in Pinole's history. Today, we discuss the modern history of Pinole and the work being done to establish the Pinole History Museum.
Anyway, so we're trying to build in fun things to do at least once a week, just something where we can escape and just get away and have some fun. So, okay.
Yeah, I really like VC2E, and to be a member there, it's really affordable, very cheap. All you have to do is buy a case of wine.
I didn't know they had membership there.
Yeah, you buy a case of wine of their family red, so $27 a bottle with a discount. So you're looking at about $330, something like that. And now you have free wine tasting for an entire year for 4 people. Yeah, and you have access to the member area where they have additional wines you can't wine taste up at the top. So, yeah, they're like the number one winery right now in Napa as far as gross revenue sales, and I think it's.
I'm not surprised, and I guess you still can't find their wines anywhere but at the winery, right?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. I think they might distribute to certain specific restaurants, and
but not
maybe,
but not retail.
But it's not retail. Yeah.
That's too bad because I love that sweet Riesling.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
Yeah, you'll have to go back and mix it with Angelica, and it tastes like brandy, like a sweet brandy. It's really good. Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about the artificial intelligence and the.
Didn't we talk about that briefly last time?
We talked about it last time. So we just got back from a trip to New York, and wherever we go visit museums, because we want to collect ideas for the Pinole History Museum. And we found some wonderful children's exhibits that use a lot of technology at some of the museums that we went to. So, you take pictures, you talk to people, and by the time we're ready to open, which is maybe 3 or 4 years down the road, this stuff will be mainstream by then. And so it should be easier to incorporate into a museum.
Yeah. How was your trip in New York?
Oh, pizza, pastrami, Chinatown, 5 museums, a baseball game, the Giants and the Mets at Citi Field. We sailed on the Hudson River on a small sailboat, 33-foot sailboat, past the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. Beautiful day.
Bring back a lot of memories.
Yeah, well, because I grew up there. And, of course, I never did a lot of the tourist stuff that you do when you're visiting. But I will say that when I grew up there, I did eat a lot of pizza, and I went to a lot of delis and had a lot of Chinese food. And it's just a great. New York is New York is exhilarating, it's exhausting, and it's exciting, and I love to go, and then I love to come home.
Mm-hmm.
Which Giants-Mets game were you at?
The one of the ones they lost on August 22nd, the 5-3 game.
Ah, okay. So you didn't get to be there for the that 13 or 12 inning game that ended on the Mets being all the Mets.
That was the forget that.
It was the first game of the series. Yeah.
That was the first game of the series, and I went to. Then they lost the next two, and then they won on Thursday. I went on Wednesday. But we had a great time. We sat 8 rows behind the Giants dugout. I was with my brother and sister-in-law who lived there. We had a great time. We had burgers and fries at Shake Shack, and if you ever go to New York, you have to visit Shake Shack. I mean that's just so much fun.
Is that like a chain out there?
Yeah, it's a chain. It's kind of like it's.
Would you say comparable like In and Out here?
In and Out, but it's in that mold.
It's in it's
like
in
a White Castle kind of.
Oh no, White Castle. No,
way better.
Now, White Castle.
So would you say it's like a Nations?
Oh yeah, it's sort of. Yeah, it's more like Nations than In and Out.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good. Yeah, Nations. That's probably a better West Coast comparison.
Okay.
Now White Castle, and here we are. We're talking about food again, which is.
It unites everyone in this world.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with museums or the Historical Society, but White Castle is the home of the Little Square burger.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to White Castle, the last time I was at a White Castle was in Wisconsin. I was on my way in 2005. I was on a baseball road trip. Every couple of years I do a baseball road trip. So this trip took us from Chicago to Milwaukee to Chicago to Cincinnati to Cleveland to Pittsburgh in 6 days. Okay, because all of those cities are very close. They're only a couple hours apart. And so we're driving up to Milwaukee to see the Giants play the Brewers at Miller Park, where, by the way, the tailgating is incredible because you pull into the parking lot, and once that row fills up, they close it off. People take the barbecues out of their cars, and they fill up the walkway, and they eat. And people invite you, if you're wearing out-of-town clothing, people will invite you to have bratwurst with them, and it's a feast. Anyway, on our way up, we stopped at a White Castle, and so a typical order is you'll order 5 burgers because they're little. They're 2 bites. Really, they're maybe 2 inches by 2 inches. That's how small they are. Slider size.
Sliders, yeah.
Yeah, slider size. But boy, they're good.
Yeah.
They're good. I don't think they have them in California.
No, it's that's East Coast only.
Yeah, East Coast, Midwest.
Yeah. You can just buy them frozen here in California.
Oh, it's not the same.
I imagine.
It's not the same. He knows.
I've been to White Castle once.
Yeah, Sam knows.
I have family in New Jersey, so we went out there. And of course,
Was it-
I'm like most people. I heard about White Castle because of Harold and Kumar going to White Castle.
I was just gonna say your adventure wasn't like Harold and Kumar, was it?
No, it was much more tamer. But
Neil Patrick Harris didn't show up.
yeah, I didn't have such a luxury.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, thanks for bringing the wine here.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So, for the people listening, we're drinking it's a chocolate lover's wine, is how they describe it. Real wine with rich, natural chocolate flavors.
Chocolate shop, yeah.
And the smell of the chocolate just whacks you right in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a good way.
And immediately your first sip, it hits the tongue and you taste the chocolate. That's the first thing you taste is the chocolate. It's great stuff.
Yeah, like what we were talking about before going live is that Kim and I have tried several chocolate red wines before, and they really tend to be a hit and miss. Yeah. You have some that are completely overwhelming, and I don't know why though. I don't know if it's because maybe just poorly made wine, or if it has something to do with how they mix. To be honest, I don't even know how they mix chocolate into the wine.
I think it has more to do with the mixing process
than anything else.
Than anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing the bottle of wine.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, this bottle is really good.
Yeah.
It's one of the better ones.
Yeah, Sprouts, $9.99 a bottle.
Yeah. Sprouts and Trader Joe's have
They
good
have
selection of wine.
They do. They have good wines.
Yeah, I just tried a $5 wine the other day from Trader Joe's. It's an Hungarian wine, and it was phenomenal. I was like, this has to be a $15-20 bottle, easy all day long. But it was for $5 at Trader Joe's, and they have that other wine from Portugal, Lisbon.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's also $5.
Now that's the wine we had the last time I was on.
Correct. Yeah, and that was really good wine too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
So
and that got us talking about the history of Pinole and the Portuguese history.
yeah, exactly.
Yes. So I'm not sure where pizza and pastrami and Chinese food is going to lead us right now, but it served as fuel for visiting museums and getting ideas for our museum, and that's what's on the forefront of my mind right now is the Pinole History Museum. And
so that has your full attention right now, the Pinole Museum.
That has our full attention. September 7th, which is a week from Friday, 6:30 to 8 o'clock at Kaiser. They have a conference room there. We have our Historical Society has a quarterly membership meeting, and the meeting topic is Make History Happen. We're going to introduce some of our consultants. We're going to have a PowerPoint on where we are right now, what we've accomplished, what we hope to accomplish, some of the things that we're going to talk about today. And that's on September 7th. And on October 13th, we're going to have our museum fundraiser and dinner. And it's going to be at St. Joseph's School, not the church, but the school, in the auditorium. And that's going to be, I think it's going to be from 6 to 9.
What's the ticket cost?
$25 for a ticket, very reasonable. Full meal, sit-down dinner, served by students from the Pinole Valley High School. They have a service group there, and they're going to help us out. And Bob Kopp, who cooks and volunteers for everything going on in Pinole, is going to help us with the food. And it's going to be a great event, and we're going to have entertainment, and going to have a raffle, and it's going to be a great evening, and that will be our kickoff fundraising event.
Very neat, very neat. So one thing that you told us is that you didn't realize that the Pinole modern history of Pinole dates back to almost 200 years.
You know, it occurred to me a couple of days ago. I was putting together some notes for this podcast, and I'm coming across a photograph of the El Rancho Pinole, the map, and the Martinez Adobe, and
okay, this is the map here?
Yeah, and so this is the map, and you can see right in the middle, it says El Pinole Grant. And that grant included all the land in Pinole, Hercules, Rodeo, Crockett, Port Costa, Martinez. That whole area was part of the El Pinole Grant, and it was granted to Ygnacio Martinez, who was the commandant, the Mexican Army commandant of the Presidio in San Francisco upon his retirement. And what the Army did in those days was they awarded retiring officers land grants. And he chose the El Pinole land grant, and he built his Adobe out in Pinole Valley, which is where Pinole Valley Park is today. And there, if you know where to look, you can see a certain tree that was on his property, and that's where his Adobe was.
Wow.
And so
is the tree marked for someone to go take a look?
The tree is marked up here in your head, so you have to know where to look for it. It's on the old Adobe Trail. People walk that trail every day and pass where the Adobe was, and don't realize, that that they've seen it. It's a big eucalyptus tree. And it occurred to me a couple of days ago that happened in 1823.
So we're almost 200 years into
We're
the history.
5 years away from the modern history of Pinole. Not the incorporation of the city, which was done in 1903, but Pinole actually became Pinole in 1823 when that land grant was established and Ygnacio Martinez established his Adobe. And I know we have a slide of that Adobe, and that is out where Pinole Valley Park
Is that
is
it
today.
right there?
Yeah, so that's the Adobe, and the area.
It's amazing the hills still look the same.
They do look the same. They look exactly the same. And that area at the top of the Adobe, that's where the ball fields are now.
Okay.
Okay, so if you can picture that. And as you're driving out Pinole Valley Road, there's a Y. And it's where the fire station is. And if you bear left, you'll stay on Pinole Valley Road. If you bear right, you'll be on Adobe Road.
Okay. I always wondered what that road was.
And that road, it doesn't go very far, but that road went to the Martinez Adobe.
Okay.
And so it ends not long after you get on it, but then there's a trail. And you can walk the trail and you can walk right past where this was. And there was a
Do you know what year this photo was taken?
This photo was taken around 1890. So this was toward the end of the Adobe. By that time, it was falling into disrepair and into ruins. And by the time the early 20th century, it was just ruins by then. So we're coming up on 200 years of modern Pinole's history, and I find that very exciting. And
you have to plan something for the 200 year
yes,
anniversary.
and I'm thinking, okay, now it's something else to do. So now I have something to plan for, and I am hoping that our museum will be open by then, and that this will be a great exhibit for our new museum, the 200th anniversary of modern Pinole, and I hope to celebrate it in our museum.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
So how did you find this out? You were just doing research for some other project or for the museum, and you stumbled across
this I've known about. The Martinez Adobe. I mean that's how modern Pinole got its start with Ygnacio Martinez. He had 11 children. He died in 1848, so he lived here for about 25 years. And one of his children, Rafaela, married Samuel Tennant. He was a doctor. He was the doctor to King Kamehameha in Hawaii. He came to California for the gold rush. He came to Pinole. He fell in love with Rafaela. He never made it to the Sierra to look for gold. And he became a rancher. The Tennant Ranch existed where the bowling alley is now. From the bowling alley all the way to San Pablo Avenue. That was his property. So he married Rafaela, and they had pears, peaches, prunes, plums. It's what they grew, which is why you have Pear Street, Peach Street, Plum Street, and Prune Street today. And so Samuel and Tennant Avenue, named after Samuel Tennant. And some of that land was sold to Bernardo Fernandez, the Fernandez Mansion, which still exists down at the end of Pinole Valley Road. He was a great merchant from Portugal. And he helped, at one point, he pretty much owned almost all of Pinole. In fact, he owned the land where the Martinez Adobe was. for a long period of time. He came here in 1854, became a great merchant. He had warehouses, and we have pictures of those warehouses. You know where the mobile home park is across the street from the Fernandez mansion, down at the end of Tenant Avenue, just before you get to Bayfront
Oh,
Park.
yeah.
Yes, that's where his warehouses were.
Okay.
Okay, he had these big grain warehouses, and they would ship that from the Southern Pacific train station, which was right next to his warehouses, into Oakland, and by ferry to San Francisco. Bernardo Fernandez had a son, Manuel Fernandez, who became a doctor, and he was the town doctor here for about 50 years. And this is how the town developed. Edward Downer Sr. became the station agent for the Southern Pacific Railroad, started a newspaper with Dr. Fernandez, founded the Bank of Pinole, which still exists, built the Downer Mansion, which still exists in Pinole and is a private residence today, and then bought controlling interest in Mechanics Bank, which is still around today. And as an aside, Edward Downer III, his grandson, was the best man at my wedding, and we had our wedding at his home in Martinez Valley. So,
wow,
you know, it's just
incredible history.
It's an incredible history, and
so I have to ask, how did they name Pinole? And is it pronounced Pinole or Pinole?
Well, the Spanish came through in the late 1700s. They had many expeditions through this area, and there was an explorer named Pedro Fages, and you can see from the map there the trail that he followed along the coast, went right up where it says San Pablo Bay in the top left corner, and you'll see El Pinole. So they encountered the Huichin Indians, the Native Americans who lived there, and they were eating a mixture of acorns and seeds that were bleached with scalding water because there's some toxins that are bad for humans in the acorns, and so you have to bleach them. And then they'd mash them up into sort of a gruel or an oatmeal kind of thing, and you could eat it that way, or you could bake them like you would have a tortilla. And the Spanish called it pinole, and that's how Pinole got its name.
Okay, Pinole.
Pinole. That's how Pinole got its name. Now, this is a reenactment. These photos were shot, I believe, in the 1950s, but this is pretty much how the Native Americans subsisted. They all lived near the creek because fresh water was very important, and so that's how Pinole got its name. And you can still buy Pinole in the supermarkets. You can still buy it, and there are Pinole recipe books. You can find them at the library, and make your own Pinole.
Very neat. Very neat.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the big project, the Pinole History Museum.
Yes.
So how's the progress coming along?
We are moving step by step toward completing our first capital campaign. So a little history about the Faria House, because that's where the museum will be. Today, the Faria House is on San Pablo Avenue, but the Faria House, as you can see from that picture, was a ranch. And it was built in 1880 by Samuel Tennant, Dr. Samuel Tennant, for his son as a wedding gift. and it was located where the Kaiser.
That's an amazing gift, right?
Yeah, and it
Getting
was
the house built.
It was located. It's about 3,000 square feet. There's 9 rooms on 2 floors, and including a kitchen. And it was where Kaiser is today. And in 2005, the building, the city had by then purchased the building, and they lifted it off its foundation, and they moved it. And they moved it to San Pablo Avenue, right next to the bus stop. And we'll get a picture of, oh, I don't see it there. Okay. You have that picture?
Yeah, it is.
It's somewhere. Anyway, so they moved it. It was quite a spectacle because it was on top of the hill, and so they had to truck it very slowly down the hill and across Pinole Valley Road, down Pinole Valley Road and Tennant Avenue. There it is. And
Wow.
Take a left on.
It's amazing how they do this.
It is amazing, and the foundation was already prepared, and they laid it down, and it's about a block up from Quinnen Street. If you stand in front of the post office, and you look to San Pablo Avenue, you'll be looking right at the Faria House. It's that light green building with the white picket fence and the beautiful rose garden that's maintained by the Pinole Garden Club.
Now,
and
this is where the new museum is going to be, right?
This is where our museum's going to be. And so I've got some interior photographs because, it's going to cost, and this is just a rough estimate, it's probably going to cost about $1 million to fix up the well, that's one of the rooms upstairs, and now that is the original stairway.
You have to keep that.
We're going to keep that, and it's in really, really good shape. So I think we might have some other interior photos. So that's going to be the main exhibit room. So when you walk in the building, that's the first building, first room on the right. And you can see we bought some jewelry cases from the Garden of Gems when they closed, and we've added some other display cases that we find at garage sales and antique stores that are going out of business and places like that. And but that's pretty much how the interior looks. So it has to be completely rewired, replumbed, and
Floors refinished.
Everything, yeah. Now the floors are in really good shape.
Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah,
by the photo.
But some of the rooms upstairs really need a lot of work. So in 2016, the Pinole City Council designated this building as the site of a museum, and they put the Pinole Historical Society in charge of making that happen. And the city allocated $50,000 toward architectural renderings, and they've hired Interactive Resources, which is an architectural firm in Point Richmond. And Interactive Resources is going to prepare the architectural designs, and then we'll get it. Then we'll know how much money we need to raise.
When do you expect for them to finish the designs?
I just found out yesterday, March of 2019. The contract was signed. It's going to be 6 months. So by March of 2019, we will know exactly how much it's going to cost to bring this up to code. Okay?
So they're just doing it to bring it up to code. It's nothing fancy, over the top, additional cosmetic upgrades.
Keep that picture up there for a moment. No, the next one. Yeah, that one. It's going to include all of the kind of electrical wiring that we will need, including for all of the
That's right. You're going to have
all the
fancy electronic exhibits.
Yes, right. So that's going to be included in that. And so that fee is $85,000. So the city kicked in $50,000. We have to raise $35,000 by next March. Okay? So here's what we're doing. We're having that kickoff fundraiser. We are going to be crowdfunding. Do
you have the crowdfunding link set up?
Not yet.
Okay.
Because
send that to us, and then we'll share it.
Great. And thank you for that. We hired a grant writer, and the grant writer researched corporate and private foundations that give money to museums. Now, most of these organizations give money to existing museums. However, there are about 15 or 20 of them that she researched that will give money toward the construction of the interior of a museum. So we have sent out grants requests. We already got $1,000 from Mechanics Bank.
Wow.
And so that's what we're doing. And so this
you have a lot of work ahead of you.
We have a lot of work. It's a very exciting, exhilarating time, and I'm confident that we will reach at least that first level where we raised the $35,000 to pay for the construction, the architectural costs. Now, we already had $17,000 to begin with, a $5,000 donation and a bequest that was given to us years ago specifically for a museum from Jesse Curran Baldwin, who was a resident here 110 years ago. She lived in the house that was the Garden of Gems on San Pablo Avenue and is now a hair salon.
Mm-hmm.
And she left us $10,000, which grew to about $12,500. So we already had some startup money. So this room here is the room that's next to that main exhibit room, and we're going to put a fireplace, a working fireplace in there. And
that's not where the original fireplace was it?
I believe it was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so from the last podcast, I believe you were saying this is going to be the kind of like the classroom.
You can call it. It's going to be a lecture room.
A lecture room, yeah, that's what you called it. A lecture room,
a classroom, a place where we can bring in a class of students from a school, and we can work with them there. We can have evening lectures by historians, small group events in this room, because that we're going to take out all of those exhibit cases. They'll be elsewhere, and we'll get rid of the stove. And I'm figuring we can probably fit maybe 35 or 40 chairs in there, which would be ideal for a small lecture.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's not being used for that, in front of the working fireplace, we plan to put a love seat. So, and you can see there's a bookcase there, and we'll have plenty of books, and people can come in and relax and read a book in front of the fireplace.
Nice.
And there will be exhibits. There will be exhibits around the perimeter of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And
I assume there will be a room to also highlight the people that were born and raised from Pinole that have gone on to do spectacular things, right?
We've probably got 150 different ideas for exhibits. It will take us 10 years just to exhibit all of the people and all of the things that happened in Pinole. We intend to have some permanent exhibits, but we also intend to have rotating exhibits. We want people to keep coming back.
Usually in a museum, how often do you rotate exhibits?
Every 3 or 4 months.
Hmm.
So more fundraising, because every time you bring in a new exhibit, you have to strike the old one, install the new exhibit. So we will at some point have a part-time curator. Fortunately, one of the consultants who's helping us does museum installations for a living, and so she will advise us as well. One of the things in front of the fireplace from the ceiling, we're going to have it's either going to be a screen or a monitor that will be able to drop down, and we can show videos and movies and things like that. Again, ideal for kids and of course for adults. You know, you'll go to a museum and you'll see a 15-minute or 20-minute movie about the history of whatever museum you're in. It's kind of like an introductory thing. That would be a great room for something like that.
So when you were in New York City,
Yeah.
when you were looking at different museums, what was probably the number one thing that fascinated you that you said, you know what, I need to figure out a way to get this into Pinole?
So we went to the New York Historical Society Museum. We specifically went there because they had a children's exhibit in the basement. We saw some really cool stuff. We saw, and you know, I have a picture of it on my phone. I don't have a picture of it over here. So we saw these vertical exhibits, and they had these different monitors in them, and these monitors were maybe 18 inches by 24 inches, okay, and they were vertical, and there'd be an image there, and every 30 seconds or so the image would change, and there'd be a new story to be told, and they had half a dozen of these images in this one display. And I thought, wow, what a great way to teach people about the history of Pinole. And when you touch the display, the image changed again. And of course there was a storyboard on the display, and they had these monitors where you placed your hand on an object, and that object all of a sudden displayed full screen, and in one of them there was a book. Okay, so they had these 4 books, and you put your hand on one, and the image of the book came up, and it had pages, and when you touched it, the page flipped. To just as if you were reading a book, but you're looking at a display monitor. Just great. So we took videos, we took photographs, and my head was spinning. How much is this going to cost, and how can we incorporate this?
How big is that museum for New York?
Oh, it's for New York, it's small. Yeah, I mean, but when you think museums in New York, you think the Met and the Museum of Natural History. Those places are enormous. The New York Historical Society, trying to think, how big that would be. Much smaller than the de Young Museum in San Francisco, much smaller than that. And it's actually right across the street from the Museum of Natural History on Central Park West. It's right across the side street. But it's bigger than anything we have here. But for New York size, you could do that whole museum in 2 hours. You can't do the Met in 2 hours.
How long would it take you to do that one?
You need all day. You can't do the Met. It's so huge.
So that's very cool. Like one of the things that I feel, and I'm just remembering back when I was a kid growing up, and you do those field trips to different museums, is that a lot of the museums are very stale. They're very static, correct. And so there was nothing that changed, nothing that was updated, nothing that stood out to really attract your attention, especially as a kid.
Yeah.
These days, every kid's going to have their phone on them, and there's a lot more distractions. So I think you really have to be a successful museum, you really have to have some pretty neat exhibits and interactive exhibits.
Yes. They have to be interactive, and our target market really is young people. Someone said to me very recently, how are you going to get parents to entice their kids to get their kids to go to the museum? And I said, that's not our goal. Our goal is we want the kids to be excited and to get their parents to bring them to the museum because they want to come. That's our goal. It's going to be a technology-laden museum. There will be some static exhibits. It's unavoidable and it's necessary. The exhibits will change. There's so much that has happened in Pinole that we can exhibit. But we only have 9 rooms. Of those 9 rooms, only 2 of them are fairly large for a farmhouse. The other rooms are small. They were bedrooms. They were kids' bedrooms. So we have to be very judicious with how we use our space.
Yeah, you know what place has a really good mix of interactive and static exhibits is Exploratorium.
Yes.
They do a really good job of that.
They
Now,
do.
they're huge, but they do a really good job to where no matter what direction you're walking through the Exploratorium, you're going to have some, static exhibit there that you can take a break from all the hyperactivity of all the other exhibits.
And so who's going to want to go there? To the Exploratorium. What's their market? Their market is young people.
Mm-hmm.
That's their market. Older people tend to like the static exhibits for nostalgia reasons, and I get that. And a lot of older people are not as into technology as the young kids are. We want to have not only the technology in the museum, we want to have a virtual museum. So that if somebody's home and for some reason they grew up in Pinole or they live in Washington now, or they can't get down to the museum for one reason or another, our exhibits will be online. So if they have a device, an Android, an iPhone, a tablet, an iPad, a laptop, something, they can view our exhibits on their device.
Yeah, I was it's funny you bring that up because it would be very interesting to see how museums could possibly go virtual, right? I mean, and you can sometimes do a lot more with certain exhibits. You could probably even have a certain amount of exhibits that are virtual only.
That's right.
Instead of in person.
So there's a museum in Chicago that we visited a couple of years ago. I'm trying to remember. It might have been the Chicago History Museum. It wasn't the Art Institute. It must have been the History Museum. Anyway, they had one of those, I don't know what you call it. It was, there was an episode, I keep coming back to Big Bang Theory. There was an episode where Sheldon is upset, but he needs a virtual presence, and he builds this sort of like robot device on wheels, and it's got a monitor on it. And you see Sheldon on the monitor, and Sheldon's in the car, and Sheldon's moving down the street on wheels on this device. Well, there's a museum in Chicago that has something like that,
Okay.
specifically to attract people who can't get to the museum. They can experience the museum through this device by hooking into this device, and this device will take them on a tour of the museum while they're watching wherever they are.
It's very cool. And I would imagine with the technology getting better and better for the virtual reality headsets, there's a lot more you could do with that.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine putting on the headset and all of a sudden you're transported to what Pinole used to look like as opposed to what it looks like now. That'd be pretty amazing.
Yeah, it would, and we'll have to look into that. You know, all that stuff costs money.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about how much is it going to cost to get this building to where it should be, to where it's up to code.
So let's go back to that. So you said it's going to be about $85,000 for this first phase.
Just for the architectural plans.
Okay, and you
That's
have
it.
until March to raise that money. After that, what's the next step?
Raising the money to actually do the construction work. Okay? And we're anticipating that might be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million. And then after that comes building out the exhibits, buying the monitors, creating the exhibits, getting professional museum people to help us create the exhibit. We have all the material, so we will need to learn how to do all that stuff.
So this could be probably a $1.5 million project.
Could be. We don't know yet. It could be that it won't cost as much to build it out as we think. It could be that we get donated labor. These are all things that we don't know yet.
And you can apply for grants too.
Grants,
Yeah.
yes. There's a lot of grant money available, and so we are.
I believe most grant money doesn't get touched, right?
There's a lot of grant money that does not get applied for. That's very true. Which is why you want a professional grant writer, which we hired. We're also working with Congressman Mike Thompson's office to find out if there's any nexus between what we need and federal funds available for that specific area, so that we can get some federal money. We're also working with...
We had Mike Thompson on the podcast.
You did?
Yep.
Yeah. He's a cool guy,
Yeah,
isn't
a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Great stories.
he? Yeah.
He's part of the wine caucus too.
Yes, he is. Yeah. So, funny Mike Thompson story. A couple of years ago, he was invited to throw out the first pitch at a independent baseball league game. I think it was either in Vallejo or Pittsburgh, and he wanted to practice batting. Okay, and so he called and asked if I knew of anybody who could help him with that, and I said, yeah, I know the guy, Greg Fear, who owns Blue Sky Sports. So we set something up, and Mike and I and Mike Lefevre, who's coached Pinole Valley High School softball team for many, many, many years, and is an usher at AT&T Park and knows everything about anything baseball or softball related that ever happened in the city of Pinole. So the three of us went down to Blue Sky Sports, and for an hour, Greg opened up the batting cages, and we're taking swings, and Mike Thompson hit a few, not that many, but he did pretty good for an old guy. Let's put it that way. And but we had a great time. He's a nice man.
Yeah. Now speaking of baseball in Pinole, Dale Swaim, right?
Dale Swaim, Pinole Valley High School.
He was just inducted into the Pinole Valley High School Hall of Fame.
It was a couple of maybe 5 years ago,
yeah.
5-6 years ago. Nice guy.
Yeah.
Really low key.
He was a really good friend of my old broker, and even flew him out to the World Series when he was the third base coach for Boston Red Sox.
Well, and he also managed the Brewers
and the Cubs.
And he's got a ring. He was the coach on the 2015 Kansas City Royals when they beat the Mets in the World Series. And he was also a coach the year before when they lost to the Giants. So he's got an AL championship ring and he's got a World Series ring, and there's not too many guys who can say that. Yeah, there have been some. Ken Singleton went to Pinole Valley High School. He's working now for the MLB Network, but he was a good baseball player. Played for the White Sox.
Yeah, and not just baseball. You had football too. You have the Tretas, Gino Treta.
All of them. They were all good football players, but Gino won the Heisman Trophy in I think it was 1992. And Dale Swaim was a great quarterback at Pinole Valley High School.
I forgot about that. He played all sports, didn't he?
Yeah, he was a great athlete. He turned down a scholarship to UCLA to sign with the Mets. Yep.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of sports history coming out of Pinole for sure.
Great baseball players and football players. In fact, I'll tell you a nice story. My birthday was last week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but you can probably see from all the gray. And so they have this thing on Facebook where you can designate a nonprofit for donations for your birthday.
I've seen a lot of people do that.
Yeah, so it says, for Jeff Rubin's birthday, he would appreciate it if you would donate too. So I get a donation last week from Ken Burrow, Burrow, Ken Burrow. Ken Burrow was a great athlete. Went to De Anza High because there was no Pinole Valley High School back then. And got a football scholarship to San Diego State, where he played for Don Coryell, the passing master who later was the head coach of the San Diego Chargers. And Ken Burrow was drafted in the second or third round, the NFL draft, and played 5 years for the Atlanta Falcons. And we actually connected through Mike Lefevre because Mike did a program for the Historical Society a couple of years ago about baseball in Pinole. And Ken Burrow was one of the athletes that he mentioned. And so I looked him up on Facebook and we connected. And he lives in Atlanta. He stayed in Atlanta, but he still has strong ties to Pinole. He donated $250 for the Pinole Historical Society. Can you imagine that? A $250. I emailed him and I said, I'm absolutely stunned by your generosity. And he emailed me back, and he started naming people like Mike Lefevre and some others who laid the foundation for him to go to college and to have a pro career. And Pinole is a great place to grow up and great sports legacy, and he's happy to help.
You'll have to have a sports exhibit or sports room in the museum. We will have several sports exhibits. Some great female softball players have come through Pinole Valley High School as well. We will acknowledge, in fact, we acknowledged a lot of them in our first book. Softball, baseball, basketball, football. You'd be stunned at how many guys from Pinole have played in the NFL. Yes, it went to Pinole Valley High. Yeah.
I was surprised to find out. But, I went to research that book. I went up to the high school and I talked to the football coach and the athletic director, and they're showing me photos. Oh, yeah, this guy plays for the Atlanta Falcons. This guy plays for the Seattle Seahawks. This guy plays for this team. they all went to Pinole Valley High School. It's incredible.
Yeah.
This city has a great, great sports history, and it will be acknowledged in our museum.
Nice.
With film clips, you see, this is something where we can have a static exhibit, and then we can have film clips of all of these athletes that people can watch.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Well, Jeff, you have a lot on your plate to
Yes.
take care of with this museum.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming back for
Thank
part
you.
2 of the
Oh,
podcast.
Thank you very much.
When you have the fundraising link for crowdfunding, shoot it over to me. We'll go ahead and share it. We'll go ahead and we can even put it up on future episodes of other guests. You know, just kind of remind people, hey, kind of donate to the local Pinole Historical Society for
That'd
the
be
museum,
great.
and good luck.
And we'll have our donation form. It's on our it's on our Facebook page, Pinole History Museum. It's
And a reminder too of the upcoming events you have,
Yes.
the fundraisers.
Yep, and it's we have the Pinole History Museum has a Facebook page. The Pinole Historical Society has a Facebook page. The Historical Society also has a website, and the donor form will be up on there very soon. And
Perfect. And then your September 7th event?
September 7th, a week from Friday, that's our meeting where we'll be introducing some of our consultants, and people will find out. They're actually going to find out a lot of the stuff that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Where we are, where we intend to go, what kind of exhibits. It's going to be very interactive, that kind of thing.
And then the fundraisers
And-
October 13th.
October 13th at St. Joseph School in the auditorium, and that's full dinner and served by students at Pinole Valley High School.
And where can they buy tickets for that?
For right now, they can buy them from me personally. They can contact me at info at PinoleHistoricalSociety.org, and we'll get a ticket. We'll get a ticket to them.
Perfect.
Mostly, we're going to be doing. We have 2 boards of directors, the museum and the Historical Society. Each board of director is going to be responsible for selling 10 or 15 tickets. We hope to have 200 people there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So thanks again for coming into the
thank you,
podcast, and
Marc.
good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lubin. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at marcguzman.com. I really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.